Calling to order this hearing. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Wednesday, February 26, 2025. The time is 2:50 in the afternoon, and this hearing is being held in room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. This is the second of 7 oversight hearings, what we call performance oversight hearings that the Committee of the Whole is having this month, actually stretching into next week. Today, we will hear testimony in this order: Office of Budget and Planning, which is part of the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and then the District of Columbia Retirement Board, and then concluding with the New Columbia Statehood Commission. Tomorrow, we will hear testimony from public witnesses regarding the DC Public Schools, that's DCPS. On Friday, government witnesses regarding the DC Public Schools, or DCPS. And then next week, we have 3 hearings. All of the council's committees are having performance oversight hearings this month, concluding, I believe, next Friday. And we do this in preparation for receiving the mayor's proposal for the fiscal year 2026 budget, which we are scheduled to receive on April 2nd. I think with that, we'll begin with the Office of Budget and Planning. According to the witness list, we have 1 non-government witness first, and that would be Eric Goulet. I'm not quite sure if he's testifying in his individual capacity or as an elected member of the State Board of Education. Mr. Goulet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and council staff. My name is Eric Goulet, Ward 3 representative for the DC State Board of Education. I am pleased to join you at today's performance oversight hearing to provide testimony on the Office of Budget and Planning and how to improve the DC budget process. Today, I will be testifying in my individual capacity as a board member and not on behalf of the board. The professionalism and expertise that the CFO's Office of Budget and Planning brings to the DC budget process every year demonstrates how DC's Central Budget Office is one of the best state-level budget offices in the country. I had the privilege to work for OBP in 2016 and with them in 6 different professional capacities from 2003 to 22. The leadership of Eric Kennedy and Kenneth Evans was instrumental in helping the District of Columbia weather the Great Recession, close a $322.1 million structural budget gap in 2011, and to obtain AAA bond ratings with 2 months cash on hand at one point in time. However, OBP will acknowledge that they are not the policymakers. They are independent referees of the budget process that call the balls and strikes between the executive and legislative branches to ensure that the budget that is proposed and approved can be certified as balanced and fiscally sound. In discussing the budget process, I want to begin by commending you, Mr. Chairman, on your decision to schedule separate performance oversight hearings for DCPS, OSSI, and DME this year, instead of having public testimony all on one day. This allows parents, students, and education advocates to have 3 minutes to speak on the issues related to each of these important education agencies instead of 3 minutes total to speak. I would encourage you to continue this format for the budget oversight hearings. I agree onto the Schools First and Budgeting Act with the principle that the council was trying to achieve through this legislation, which is to have more reliable and stable funding for individual DCPS schools. Unfortunately, Section 104 of the Schools First and Budgeting Act clearly violates Section 442 of the DC Home Rule Act and constitutional separation of powers principles. The council does not have the authority to mandate the mayor submit specific budget marks for schools, neither outright nor by the bill's prescriptive statutory formula. This purported law creates tremendous confusion among DC parents for the last 2 years about why it is not being followed. An executive branch proposes a budget and the legislature amends and approves it. The council can require the mayor to submit information with the budget, but it isn't allowed to dictate the expenditure numbers in the mayor's submission. The DC Council has the statutory authority to request a legal opinion from the Independent Office of the Attorney General under DC Code 1-301-81. You previously utilized this regarding SNAP funding, Mr. Chairman. If you really believe that the Schools First and Budgeting Act is a valid law, Mr. Chairman, please request an opinion from Attorney General Brian Schwab today, so there can be clarity. I would love to find out that I'm wrong about the validity of this law. We cannot afford to see a repeat of any finger pointing by the council at the mayor for not following this act, when the shared focus of the legislative and executive branches needs to be on effectively governing our city to preserve home rule. I want to commend your leadership the last 2 years, Mr. Chairman, for restoring much needed funding for Ward 3 schools during the council's review and approval of the mayor's proposed budget. You funded our schools at the level established through the Schools First in Budgeting Act formula. This was both sound education policy and a demonstration of the budget process properly working, because the council was exercising its power under the Home Rule Act to make adjustments to the proposed budget. Lastly, the current DC budget schedule is an archaic remnant of an era before DC had budget autonomy, when it was required to approve a budget in May to secure approval of its budget by Congress before the summer recess for Congress. Now that DC has budget autonomy, the council should not force the mayor to release the local school budgets prior to the release of the CFO's end of February revenue estimate. Since public school budgets make up a significant percentage of the district's overall budget, this forces the executive branch to be overly cautious in budgeting for schools, because the executive needs to assume a worst-case scenario with the February revenue estimate, particularly during tight fiscal times and potentially uncertain revenue estimates like we are experiencing right now. Section 103D of the Schools First in Budgeting Act requires that initial DCPS school budgets must be submitted 42 calendar days before the submission date of the district's annual budget, which is April 2nd this year, and means that these budgets should have been released February 19th, 25. And I do not see the school budgets posted yet on the DCPS website for fiscal year 26. In the annual budget submission resolution, the council should give the mayor approximately 2 weeks after the February revenue estimate to release the initial DCPS school budgets. This allows local school advisory team review during the petition period, and the full budget can be transmitted by late April. This schedule accommodates the council's 70-day statutory review period with 2 votes on the budget a full week before its July council summer recess. For example, this year's April 2nd, 2025 budget submission date required initial school budgets to be released February 19th. However, an April 24th budget submission date would have allowed the initial school budgets to be released on March 13th. And the council still would have had the full 70 days to approve the budget by July 3rd, and then an extra week to approve the Budget Support Act before council goes on its summer recess. That concludes my testimony for today, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and for the little bit of extra time. I am available to answer any questions that you or your colleagues have of me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Goulet. Thank you for your testimony. The arguments you made regarding schools first is kind of interesting, because you say that it, on the one hand, is not legally sufficient, and on the other hand, you appreciate that schools first resulted in better budgeting for the Ward 3 schools that you represent.
Mr. Chairman, I would say your leadership resulted in that, because you are the one who put the funding in at the council level. So I wouldn't credit the Schools First Act for that. I think you have a sound formula in there, and I definitely support what you're trying to do with it. I think that that's just has to happen at the council level, which you did by reallocating funds from central the last year to our individual schools. So,
but I will note that, as you well know, because you were a staffer at the council, it's very hard for the council to make substantial changes to the mayor's budget, what the mayor proposes. And in fact, what the mayor will do is she will be very critical and maybe pull out a few Washington Monument type arguments if the council does make any significant changes to what she proposes. I mean, one way to look at schools first, which is not the way I would argue it, but maybe you could think of it this way, is that the schools first is a guide to the mayor of what the council wants. And so, but anyway, I just was going to make that point. The other is that the budget submission timeline, it's interesting what you say, but 1 week, one additional week for approving the Budget Support Act before council recess We have sometimes needed 2 or 3 additional weeks for the Budget Support Act. So that gets really crunchy.
Mr. Chairman, we used to do it the same day many years ago, and it is a challenge, I acknowledge. I think the key really is to try to get it nailed down as close to final on first reading, and then be ready, because really a lot of the changes at that point are technical, as you know, on second reading, because once you approve the local budget and you approve the numbers, you can't change the Budget Support Act in a substantive way that would affect those numbers. So in that additional week, if you're just making the technical changes, then I think that can be done. And the advantage to doing it in this format is really heavily beneficial to our public schools and our LSATs, because they can get accurate school budgets and then the full 2 weeks to review them. And I think as we see right now with the revenue uncertainty, the budgets are delayed again, and LSATs and parents feel the crunch when they don't get the full 2 weeks to look at those budgets before then the mayor's budget comes out. So I just would encourage you to look at this change, Mr. Chairman. I know it does, create a tight time for you right before recess, but I think the benefit to our parents and our schools outweighs that if it's something that you can accommodate.
And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time today.
Let me move to Eric Kennedy, who's the Deputy Chief Financial Officer for the Office of Budget and Planning.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. I am Eric Kennedy, Deputy Chief Financial Officer and Budget Director of the Office of Budget and Planning, or OBP, for the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I am very pleased to appear before you today to testify on fiscal year FY 2024 performance of OBP and outline my plans for this programmatic office within the OCFO agency in FY 2025 and beyond. I am joined by Sherry Greenfield, the Associate Deputy Chief CFO. I will cover the following areas in my remarks: FY 2024 and FY 2025 year-to-date operating expenditures, FY 2024 performance and accomplishments, FY 25 operational goals. OBP is one of the key programmatic offices within the OCFO. In FY 2024, OBP operated within its local funds revised budget of $7.066 million, spending $7.03 million, or roughly 99.5% of our available local funds budget. Through the 10th of February 2025, we have obligated or expended $2.287 million, or 34.1% of our FY 2025 approved budget of $6.713 million. We expect to end the fiscal year within our current budget. Our major accomplishments for FY 2024 were in 3 areas. During FY 2024, the district made many changes to its budget, and OBP successfully processed, tracked, and reported on these budget modifications throughout the year utilizing our JIRA workflow software. We've expanded our use of this software, which includes tracking key performances or performance indicators, or KPIs, such as processing reprogrammings and other budget modifications. Our use of JIRA software allows us to track budget modification requests from point of origination to termination, and provides us with the ability to upload supporting documentation that may be required for annual comprehensive financial report, or for the annual comprehensive financial report, year-end audits of the budget modification process. During budget formulation, we worked closely with the mayor's budget team to produce the district's FY 2024 supplemental budget, the FY 2025 through FY 2030 capital improvements plan, and the FY 2025 proposed budget and financial plan. The mayor's budget proposal was submitted to council on April the 3rd, 2024. OBP delivered on time all council requested documentation in support of the mayor's proposed budget. Between April and July, we worked closely with the council staff to review the budget, and the council approved the district budget, which was transmitted to Congress on July 30th, 2024. I will now discuss our key budget execution tools. District agencies prepare and submit monthly financial review process reports, or FRPs, to OBP for review and analysis. We use the FRP to analyze agency projected year-end expenditures and revenue collections and compare them to agency budgets. If agencies report spending pressures, we work with the mayor's budget team as they propose changes to resolve the pressures. This is primarily accomplished by the OCFO-managed Spending Pressure Task Force. In FY 2024, we worked closely with the agency's fiscal officers and the executive office of the mayor to process a total of 239 operating and capital reprogramming requests, of which 85 were sent to the council for approval. OBP is responsible for reviewing all requests from agencies to establish grant budget authority by the council and approving all requests to modify grant budget authority. In FY 2024, OBP processed 756 grant budget modifications, of which 396 required passive approval by the council. We continue to improve our budget processes and management. Following the completion of the FY 2024 budget supplemental and approval of the FY 2025 budget, OBP conducted our annual budget formulations lessons learned exercise. One of the primary outcomes of the lessons learned was that OBP and other OCFO members Sorry. One of the primary outcomes of the lessons learned was that the OBP and other OCFO members must continue to have 10 calendar days after pencils down to conduct due diligence. This ensures that the budget and financial plan are balanced, including that any necessary technical adjustments are made. The proposed Budget Support Act, along with the Local Budget Act, LBA, are thoroughly reviewed for financial and legal sufficiency. The documents required by the council are properly vetted and assembled, and the timely publication of budget volumes on the various district websites. OBP staff members work diligently with the OCFO's Office of the Chief Information Officer, or OCIO, to sunset the budget formulation application, or the BFA, which was the district's legacy budget formulation application. In place of the BFA, an interim budget application, or IBA, was developed and implemented with a staggered rollout between October 2023 and February 2024. Some key improvements of the IBA include a more user-friendly and updated interface, reduced click-throughs for non-personal services entries, and improved transparency within interagency project budgeting. The largest improvements were to capital budgeting and the formulation of the supplemental budget within IBA. Parallel to the development and implementation of IBA, OBP began the development of the new Oracle-based DIFS budget formulation system. During FY 2024, OBP successfully launched the district's grants application system, or DGAS, which is a new online application to manage the transmission, workflow, and reporting of district grant budget authorization process. The benefits of DGAS are improved transparency and streamlined process for submitting and tracking agency grant budget establishment and modification requests, enhanced access for OCFO staff to monitor and track the progress of budget authority requests at any stage of the approval workflow, and to generate status reports. Real-time email notification to OCFO staff when OBP posts comments as requests are being promoted through the stages of the workflow. OBP continued to close Capital Federal Highway Trust Fund projects, moving a total budget of more than 6.98 million back to the Housing Trust Fund master projects. In 2025, our goal for 2025 is to continue to build on our successes in meeting OCFO's strategic objectives of creating a climate of continuous improvement. OBP's key operational goals are as follows: collaborate with the mayor and the council to develop a supplemental budget for FY 2025 and a balanced budget and financial plan for FY 2026. Achieve significant progress in strengthening financial management. A key achievement this year is the continued development of standard operating procedures, or SOPs, covering budget development, execution, monitoring, and reporting. These SOPs will streamline process, enhance accuracy, and improve oversight, ensuring greater efficiency and accountability. Continue to enhance KPIs for reprogramming, tracking efficiency, approval timelines, budget impact, and compliance. These KPIs provide real insight, optimize decision-making, and reinforce fiscal discipline. During FY 2025, OBP plans to expand our use of KPIs in other process areas to improve efficiency and performance. Continue to work closely with the OCIO and the team implementing the district's integrated financial system, or DIFS, to implement the new Oracle-based budget system for FY 2027 budget formulation that will be integrated with the core enterprise resource planning financial system. Continue to improve OBP's role in the fiscal year-end budget and accounting closing process. In FY 2025, OBP created a form in DIFS which automatically populates Note 10 of the ACFR with subsequent year expenditures. Continue to manage the spending pressure task force to quickly identify emerging spending pressures and work collaboratively with the city administrator's budget team to develop effective gap closing plans. Continue to improve capital budget management and oversight by ensuring that the FY 2026 through FY 2031 capital improvement plan remains within the 12% debt cap. Currently, OBP staff members are working with the Mayor's Office of Budget and Performance Management to develop the Mayor's proposed FY 2025 budget supplemental and FY 2026 budget and financial plan, which is due to the council on April the 2nd, 2025. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the entire OBP and other OCFO team members for their hard work and professionalism over the past year. We look forward to working with the council and other policy makers during the budget approval process to develop a transparent and balanced budget and financial plan for FY 2026 through FY 2029. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks. I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Several sections of your pre-hearing responses reference a budget system operations / DIFS component within OBP. Your testimony doesn't touch on this. According to your organizational chart, there are 13 positions working on BSO / DIFS, one of whom is on detail from DYRS. Can you talk about what this initiative is and how it is being staffed?
So that team, the majority of them are detailed from other posts. Some of them were AFOs in the various district agencies, but they were initially they were detailed to the main DIFS project. As you recall, we started working on the ERP system first, and those people were detailed there to work on that, along with the budget system. So when, as you may recall, the $15 million in capital funding was removed from the OCFO's budget, we didn't think we could continue that project. When the council restored the 15 million, we decided I would take over managing the process of the budget development system, including the IBA. So I took a fraction of the people that were working on the ERP and would have been working on the DIFS system and brought them to OBP for my oversight and to set up an infrastructure so that I could manage the development of IBA and the development and implementation of the DIFS, Oracle-based DIFS budget system. So those people are being paid out of capital funding that was set aside for the DIFS project, specifically the DIFS budget system project. And they all fall under me. They're temporary until we can go live and finish the enhancements that we need to make that we're gonna have to make to the DIFS system that we plan to go live on October 1st, 2025. Did that answer your question?
It actually made me think of a different question, which is, you reminded me that the capital project was underfunded a couple years ago. Is it adequately funded now?
Yes.
Because I believe the project's not complete.
No, the funding was for 2 years. It was staggered over 2 years. And as I said, I plan to roll out the DIFS budget system on October 1st and retire IBA, which is an interim. We had 3 months to build the interim budget system. We did it. It's very successful, but it's not cloud-based. It doesn't give us the same best practicing budgeting that the new DIF system is going to provide for us. It doesn't provide a sandbox IBA does not provide a sandbox for your budget team like the DIF system will. And again, the biggest piece is IBA is not cloud-based. So it would become yet another BFA, another legacy system that only a certain group of people that could work on. So it's very important that we roll this system out on time. And right now we are on schedule.
So I wrote a note, will be complete and rolled out on October 1st, 2025.
That's correct.
Your pre-hearing responses indicate that the capital asset replacement scheduling system, CARS, now includes 100% of district assets. You also respond that you are looking to add events DC assets, the ballpark and the convention center. Can you talk more about this and whether you will extend it to the arena now that we own it? And whether the ESA arena will be included?
I'm going to have Ms. Greenfield answer that question.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson. I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
With regard to the CARS system, you and your written answers said that you're looking to add events DC assets to ballpark and the convention center. Can you talk more about this and whether you will extend it to the arena now that we own it and whether the ESA arena will be included?
Okay. Yes, we are preliminarily speaking to the events DC. We've already begun the discussions with them to add their assets to the CARS system. I can't say that the arena or that would be added later. I have not seen all of their particular assets. We just started speaking with them. Events DC uses Oracle-based EPM system, an ERP system. And so we're hoping that we can also assist them with that, setting up their capital projects there, and then being able to feed that information into CARS.
So do you have a timeline for that?
We've had 2 meetings with them. We're going to be meeting again with them in March. Once they finish their putting together their budget submissions, my understanding. So I don't have an exact timeline for when we would be complete with having that in cars, but I would think maybe June.
Wait just a second. One of our pre-hearing questions concerned the financial review process reports or FRPs. I think you touched on that briefly in your statement. The FRPs often do not include a gap closing plan or a meaningfully robust one for agency spending pressures. Why is this acceptable to OBP? What is OBP doing or going to do to ensure that agencies have useful, complete gap closing plans? And your written answer was OBP continues to work to provide annual training to staff members responsible for developing FRP gap closing plans. During the second quarter of FY25, FRPs will include a checklist in the FRP module that requires an affirmative response that, if applicable, a gap closing plan has been provided, or the system will not allow submission. If OBP deems that the gap closing plan is not acceptable, it will be returned to the agency by OBP to make our recommended changes. From a qualitative perspective, what more can OBP do to work with the agencies to create a quality plan rather than essentially act as a gatekeeper?
So over the last, I'd say 4 years, we've been doing more face-to-face with our counterparts, AFOs, and the like, and hosting trainings and services, discussions around developing FRPs and what the expectation is for the FRP. I know that in some instances throughout the OCFO, we've suffered a lot of turnover. So it's been hard to keep that information sharing going. We have to do it every year, and we're dealing with a lot of new people every year. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to get there. It's only to say that that was one of the hurdles that we identified. And so we're now going to use technology to help us push back and say, hey, listen, this needs to be more robust. This needs to do this. It needs to do that. And I also have a dedicated resource or someone in my office that I've dedicated to just this, because it's not the first time I've heard this about the FRPs. And I suspect that we'll get there, but it's going to take a little while, but we'll get there. I'm
So it's
sure of that.
not the first time you've heard about it, because you've heard about it from me.
Yep.
So not very often, but every now and then I will ask for an FRP, or I will ask you why an FRP for an agency says there's a spending pressure and there's not a gap closing plan. You said that you now have somebody who's dedicated to just working on FRPs?
Yes, I've devoted resources to just that. I also, like most people.
When did you bring that person on?
They've already been here. I just gave them some new duties.
When?
Last year,
All right.
sometime around June, towards the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Were you
Yeah.
going to say more?
No, I was only going to say, well, I was going to say that I too have experienced a lot of turnover, more than OBP has ever since the pandemic. And so it's been really difficult to give people additional work because they're already, a bit stretched. But now the team that I was able to dedicate to this, it's that team has almost no turnover. So I'm pretty confident that we're going to see some changes quickly.
That you're pretty confident that we will see better quality?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think so. I think that's right. The second quarter, I would say by the third quarter FRPs, you should see some improvement in the second. You should definitely the gap closing plan. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. But by the third quarter, I think you should be able to see a notable change. Because like I said, we have dedicated resources now. That's not all they do, but that's one of their responsibilities.
And that would be the third quarter this year.
Third quarter of this year, yeah. And I know for a while we had to figure out, we were having some technical issues of getting FRPs transmitted appropriately. And
So that was
that's
my next question.
yeah, and that's been resolved as far as I know, unless there might be a glitch here or there, but as far as I know, that's been resolved.
So you believe we're getting them timely, and what does timely mean?
Well, timely is, so we have a schedule, and I've shared that, I believe I shared the schedule with your budget office. I might not have shared that schedule, but I will share that schedule
Okay,
with the budget office. When I have to send an FRP back, because it doesn't, it doesn't say what I needed to say, that obviously will change the delivery schedule. So, we can work out some sort of,
well, are they all gonna wait for the same to be transmitted at the same time?
I'm sorry, say that again, sir?
If one gets delayed, are they all being delayed?
No, it's just that one. But that one could be a critical one for you. I know which ones that you want to see up front. I know those, the primary ones, you want to see them all, but I know the ones that are really, really important to you. And sometimes if it doesn't come now under this new process, if it doesn't come the way we expect it to show up, it's going to go back, but not just go back, but we actually will reach out and work with the agencies to make the improvements to it. So you're going to see some delays. When I give you that schedule, you're going to see some delays there.
Yes, but most of them will be coming on
Yeah,
time.
yes, the majority will be coming on
And what
time.
is on time? Help me here. How soon after the quarter?
I believe it's 30 days, 30 days after the quarter ends, or is it the quarter or
The quarter.
the quarter? Okay, 30 days after the quarter ends. But then, we have our process of review and
Yeah.
so forth and so on. But I would say we have a handful of extremely complicated FRPs, and unfortunately, the ones that you want to see are part of that group.
Well, that could be why. Do you have an update on when we will get the cash flow report?
I don't know.
Are you
I'm
working on
sorry.
that, or is that the front office?
That is being worked on. The front office is overseeing that. I am part of that team, but I'm not actually the person producing it.
In your testimony, you mentioned OCFO managed spending pressure task force. Who is that?
Yes, that includes my office, or a representative from my office. That includes a representative, OCFO representative from each cluster. That includes the mayor's budget director, Jenny Reed, and it includes the mayor's deputy budget director, Jason Kim. That's the group that task force is comprised of. And that task force has been in place for a number of years, and it's getting better and better every year. But at a minimum, we have a process now for closing spending pressures or addressing spending pressures where everyone is involved. It's just not OBP working with the mayor's budget office trying to figure out. It's everyone. It's the AFO. It's the cluster budget director. It's everyone.
So it's Office of Budget and Planning has a
Office of
representative.
Budget and Planning.
And then I wrote down OCFO, each cluster. That
Yep.
would be what do you call it?
It could be an AFO. Each cluster, each ACFO, each associate CFO is given the flexibility of putting who they want, staffing the committee with who they want on the committee. So it could be an AFO, it could be a budget director, it could be a budget officer.
But one from each
But one,
cluster.
they're one, or actually it's, let me fix that, two. There are two people from each cluster on the committee, on the task force.
And then the mayor's budget director,
and her deputy budget director. Yep,
and that's the task force.
that's the task force.
Are we gonna get the budget on time?
I hope so. I really hope so.
I noticed you ad-libbed in your testimony about the 10 days.
That actually wasn't supposed to be there, but I'm sorry. That was not supposed to be there. Took that out, but okay. It made it in.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no
Okay.
other questions for you.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to turn to the retirement board. Lau Blanchard, who's a trustee, the council representative on the retirement board, and JP Balistrieri, who's executive director. If I stand up while you're testifying, I just need to stretch a little. I may, you just do your thing and we'll see if I stand or sit or fall off the chair. I'm reminded you need to turn your microphone on.
I
Well
just
done.
did.
Yeah,
How's that sound?
It's
Good afternoon.
very good.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Council of the District of Columbia's Committee of the Whole. I am Lyle Blanchard, trustee and chair of the Legislative Committee of the DC Retirement Board, DCRB. DCRB, as a member of the Board of Trustees, I want to thank you, Chairman Mendelson, and the committee for your continued support. The trustees look forward to working with you this year and with the committee and the council as DCRB fulfills its fiduciary and administrative responsibilities. DCRB was created by Congress in 1979 under the DC Retirement Reform Act as an independent agency of the District of Columbia government. DCRB has exclusive authority and discretion to manage the assets of the District of Columbia Teachers Retirement Fund and the District of Columbia Police and Firefighters Retirement Fund, collectively the fund. I'm pleased to report that DCRB continues to be a fully funded retirement system with the plan's aggregate actuarial funding status level at a 103.7% as of the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, 2024. The DCRB's total funded assets also reached $12.2 billion as of December 31, 2024, and we continue to make progress in our efforts to create a comprehensive retirement system. From its inception in October of 1982 through September 2024, the plan has generated an annualized gross return of 8.54%, exceeding DCRB's actuarial long-term return target. I'm also happy to report that DCRB has been among a select number of public pension systems to ever receive the Public Pension Coordinating Council's 2024 Recognition Award for Funding and Administration in recognition of meeting professional standards for plan funding and administration as set forth in the public pension standards. And for the 15th consecutive year, DCRB was awarded on November 13th, 2024, the Government Finance Officers Association's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for its fiscal year ending 2022 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting. I now turn over our testimony to the Executive Director, JP Balistrieri, who will provide you with more detailed information about our FY 2024 accomplishments and our goals for FY 2025 and beyond.
Thank you, Trustee Blanchard. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and council members of the District of Columbia Committee of the Whole. Thank you for your time today. Joining me from DCRB are people from my team, from the staff and management, Lori Morgan, our deputy CFO, Leslie West, our CFO, Daniel Hernandez, our pension administrator, and Ann Sterner from Bolton Advisory Services, our actuary for DCRB. Since our last performance hearing last year, February 9th, 2024, we've made a lot of progress in several areas for DCRB and have had a lot of accomplishments. DCRB's mission, as you know, is to lead by serving others and includes two overarching goals: to prudently invest the assets of the fund for exclusive benefit of its members and to provide plan members with accurate and timely annuity payments and best-in-class services. DCRB's priority is to invest and manage the fund, which is held in trust for the exclusive benefit of all plan members and their eligible survivors and beneficiaries. The assets of the fund must only be used to pay benefits to plan members and reasonable associated administrative expenses in the ordinary course. DCRB's Board of Trustees as fiduciaries and DCRB staff and management, who are required in good faith to discharge their responsibilities in the interest of the plan members and beneficiaries, must always continue to work collaboratively to maximize returns as well as manage and mitigate risks to the fund. Our management approach organizationally is premised on serving our mission and priority. It is imperative to focus on the organization's employees and their needs and objectives to optimize operational efficiencies. We constantly exercise comprehensive organizational review and action by taking a bottoms-up approach in operating our organization. In other words, we apply a consultative style in decision-making, organizational change, and leadership in which employee participation is promoted and empowered at all levels of the organization to drive decisions in an optimal and sustainable manner. At DCRB, it's customary to meet with each of the department managers and their team members to understand objectively how each department and their staff integrate with other departments and their teams. The most important part of this frequent process is to work with key leadership personnel in various departments as well as support staff to constantly identify and understand strengths and weaknesses across the agency's operations and improve cross-functional efficiencies amongst the departments. To date, this approach has permitted DCRB to identify and implement actions for organizational needs, efficient allocation of personnel, as well as required processes, policies, and operational budget review. Ultimately, through this approach, we continue to develop and maintain a sustainable deep bench of highly skilled personnel across the organization, thus limiting the need for outside consultant work to matters that require vital independent third-party opinions and advice in transparently fulfilling DCRB's fiduciary duties. I'm pleased to report that DCRB continues to be a workplace where employees are free to be their authentic selves and are encouraged to speak their minds while collaboratively sharing their opinions in a collegial work environment. In fiscal year 2024, DCRB continued to promote, actively recruit, most importantly, provide employees a platform for personal growth and a bona fide career pathway. We filled both internally and externally 24 vacancies in fiscal year 24. We continue to proudly operate as one of the most diverse pension funds in the United States with a workforce that is comprised of 62% female and 82% minority employees. In the past year, we have promoted a total of 7 employees at various staff levels, where 6 were female and 6 were minority staff members. Investments. Very important to maintain firm funded status and liquidity for us. One of DCRB's major ongoing responsibilities is to prudently invest fund assets with the goal of earning a return that meets and exceeds the established actuarial long-term investment return of 6.25%. This target is intended to sustain the fund's viability over the long-term investment horizon. As of DCRB's fiscal year end September 30th, 2024, DCRB closed fiscal year at a net return rate of 17.51%, as well as an average net return of 6.8% per year over the last 20 years, well ahead of our actual return target rate of 6.5% per annum. As mentioned earlier, DCRB continues to be fully funded retirement system with plans aggregate funding status level at 103.7%. The funding status is determined by comparing the value of the assets held by the pension fund with present value of its liabilities. The liabilities typically include the future pension payments that the fund is obligated to pay retirees. DCRB's funding status of 103.75%, 103.7% versus last year's 102.3 fiscal year 2023 funded value, compared to the estimated average funding status of the 100 largest U.S. public pension plans at 80.2%, displays DCRB's firmer ability to fulfill its present and future obligations to pensioners versus its larger public peers over the long term. The board's independent actuary conducts an annual valuation each year to determine the funded status of the plans and to identify the district's contribution to the fund. I want to iterate that we are only a handful of 5 or so pension funds in the U.S. out of 304 state-administered pension funds with fully actuarially funded status over 100%, according to Equitable Institute's analysis. The fund's balanced and diverse allocation of its assets has been paramount in maintaining resilient investment portfolio during a period of continued global unrest, war, elections, and economic uncertainty since last year's performance hearing. As of February 19th, 2025, the fund has grown by about $1.1 billion to a total market value of $12.5 billion since February 29th, 2024, and achieved the calendar year-end 2024 net return of 8.3% to the fund. DCRB continues to sustainably maintain firm fund liquidity. As of February 19th, 2025, the fund holds approximately $112 million in cash versus monthly payment obligations of approximately $29 million. This is well above the target rate of 3 times the average that we like to regularly have available for benefits payments obligations, currently at about 4 times the monthly pension obligation. DCRB also has approximately $2.3 billion in high-quality bonds convertible into cash within a week as of February 19, 2025. To achieve long-term sustainable risk-adjusted net returns, DCRB consistently needs to rebalance the portfolio of assets under management. Our investment team engages in the regular rebalancing process of realigning the weightings of DCRB's portfolio of assets by periodically buying and or selling assets to maintain a constant, consistent, desired level of asset allocation and risk. Our investment team monitors the portfolio's asset allocation daily to ensure assets allocations stay in line with targets and there is sufficient liquidity to consistently meet these obligations. DCRB completed a total of 64 rebalancing transactions valued at over $2.6 billion for fiscal year 2024. Overall, portfolio rebalancing is a fundamental aspect of pension fund management, enabling effective risk management, asset allocation optimization, and alignment with long-term investment objectives, while constantly adapting to changing market conditions in a dynamic and volatile market environment. Investment fees verification analysis. DCRB continues to have a transparent and independent process for reporting investment management fees and expenses with its independent consultant, Comore, a specialized consultant in investment management fees and transaction cost verification, analysis, and management. Comore consistently completes the recalculation, review, verification, analysis of these fees and expenses on a quarterly basis for us. This report and ongoing fees verification review provides DCRB the opportunity to evaluate day-to-day the mitigants and solutions in managing risk related to investment fund managers' investment fees and carried interest practices. We continue to apply internal best practices and processes in standardizing acceptable terms and conditions with our investment management agreements to actively monitor and validate fees quarterly and mitigating risk, to actively track agreement terms and conditions across the portfolio to ensure compliance with special provisions with agreed with investment managers, and benchmarking certain investment managers' fee structures and terms that deserve higher scrutiny in the pre-investment evaluation process. Based on a benchmarking analysis completed by CM Benchmarking, DCRB's investment cost of 55.3 basis points was below the benchmark cost of 65.9 basis points compared to its peer funds, resulting in $11.5 million in fee savings in calendar year 2023, the most recent available full reporting period. Transaction cost analysis. In February 2024, DCRB worked with its independent consultant, Zeno AN, to gather all trade data needed to complete a historical review for DCRB public equity accounts. and to perform an in-depth historic ongoing trade cost analysis. This assessment benchmarks DCRB public market investment managers' trading costs to ensure they are in line with the market standards. It also assists DCRB in evaluation of prospective investment managers' trading costs to identify potential issues before hiring new investment managers and in developing investment manager transition strategies, as well as measuring and evaluating transition costs between public investment managers. Moving forward, this will be an important risk management and transparency tool to fulfill DCRB's fiduciary duty and apply the best reasonable prudent practices available for execution in constantly monitoring public investment managers and their brokers' trading practices and activities. DCRB has fully implemented an internal audit process plan and charter that defines the role, organizational status, authority, responsibilities, compliance actions, priorities, and scope of activities of the internal audit function. It also includes the underlying objectives of the function and the application thereof into integrated operational quality and risk management procedures and processes. In fiscal year 24, we conducted a robust review of our operations across DCRB. DCRB's Director of Internal Audit and Compliance, in collaboration with management and in-house investments and benefits compliance councils, actively reviewed organizational areas of strength and weaknesses in the implementation, administration, fiduciary oversight of the agency's retirement program, reviewed DCRB third-party administration and other support operations, including investments, board governance, and fiduciary oversight functions pursuant to applicable federal and district laws, rules, regulations, and industry best practices. For example, ultimately, the goal is to drive consistent organizational accountability, ownership, and transparency. Overall, internal audit collaborates with support and supports management and the trustees to accomplish business objectives within an acceptable risk framework by bringing a systematic, disciplined, transparent, sustainable compliance approach to DCRB's operations. DCRB's financial statements are audited annually, and we continue to attain and maintain unqualified audit opinions and report our financial activities according to required governmental accounting standards. On December 12, 24, DCRB's auditors, BCA Watson Rice, issued its opinion and it identified no material weaknesses in internal control or financial reporting for DCRB. Subsequently, on January 31st, 25, the District of Columbia's Office of Inspector General, in its compliance report on the government auditing standards for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 24, confirmed and concurred with our auditor's opinion that there were no identified material weaknesses in internal control over financial reporting. Building and maintaining trust has been an imperative to our effectiveness. Our goals to improve stakeholder trust are focused on defining and achieving meaningful balance between flexibility and consistency in our benefits administration processing, as well as our communications. We have implemented specific initiatives in place to increase transparency with members and other stakeholders. We are continuously evaluating our regular processes and our operational projects to ensure that they are efficient, transparent, communicated clearly, and consistently compliant with rules and regulations. We also identified and executed upon active opportunities to streamline and improve operational projects in collaboration with DCPS, DCHR, FAMS, MPD on individual participant issues, and to support orientation and retirement workshops for their employees. DCRB met and continues to frequently meet with its stakeholders inside and outside DCRB to discuss improvements in the transition from active employment to retirement and to promote collaboration amongst all the agencies involved in the retirement process. The collaboration with our district partners to increase the quality of data used to calculate benefits will contribute to additional member-specific initiatives, data accuracy, and faster processing times wherever possible. In fiscal year 24, DCRB proactively engaged and executed upon specific feasibility exercises and actionable initiatives to ensure all active member data in one source system in the near and long term, build end-to-end retirement process maps, and better define roles, responsibilities, and lines of authority for all stakeholder agencies involved in the retirement admin process. In collaboration with OCTO, DCRB again provided active police officers, firefighters, and teachers with their annual statement of estimated benefits, leveraging the PeopleSoft self-service online portal. DCRB worked with its independent actuary and stakeholder HR departments to improve data quality so that the statements could be more accurate and useful for the members. The statements included the benefit estimates for both monthly retirement benefit and a deferred retirement benefit. The annual statements provide plan participants with an estimate of the total value of their benefit over a 25-year period. DCRB has also worked with its stakeholders on standardizing internal forms and improving their PeopleSoft access to identify data issues before members submit for retirement. To further increase transparency to the members, DCRB revised its public website so that the members can more easily locate information of relevance to them. Closing, I'd like to thank you, Chair Mendelson, and the District of Columbia Committee of the Whole for your support and in helping DCRB carry out our mission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your statement. And thank you to everybody at the Retirement Board for the work. I do have some questions. According to the latest actuarial evaluation, next year's combined annually determined contribution will be $204 million, down from $14 million from last year's contribution. Do these numbers take into account the recently awarded new collective bargaining agreement for the teachers union?
I don't believe they do.
That is correct. They do not take that into account.
There is, however, in the actuarial calculations, an assumption for an increase in salaries or wages, correct?
That is correct.
And if I remember correctly, it's something like 3%. My question isn't whether it's 3%. The collective bargaining agreement, as I recall, for the current year is 0% and then 3 or 4% in each of the next 4 years, maybe?
It's approximately 3, I believe.
Would that be covered by that assumption, or is that assumption sort of what do I want to call COLAs, and then the collective bargaining agreements on top of that?
So while I have read the collective bargaining agreement, it is not clear to me whether the increases are in addition to COLAs or whether that is simply the increase. But I will say that in our actuarial valuation, we have a salary increase assumption that includes both cost of living adjustments and merit increases. And it depends upon a person's years of service that they've been working as a teacher. And the range is from 7.1% at 5 years of service, and it grades down gradually to a 4% assumption for members with 20 or more years of service.
So we have approximately a 3% inflation assumption annually and a payroll growth assumption of 4% per annum. Is that correct?
That is correct. The payroll growth assumption is the aggregate expected growth of payroll, but we also have an underlying assumption for each individual for their salary increases, which I mentioned start at a little over 7% for lower years of service, grading down to a 4% assumption. So we do assume that pay increases will occur in future years.
So from those assumptions, we're fairly covered, even though the collective bargaining agreement might be a little vague on whether it's COLA plus salary increases. We cover both in our assumptions, correct?
Did you say fairly covered? Is that the way you put it?
We cover both
Yes, but
variables
but
in our actuarial assumptions per what our actuary just explained.
But you characterized it as it's fairly covered? I'm trying to
No,
remember what
We
phrase you
cover
used.
both aspects, both variables of COLA level type inflation and employee salary growth.
Yes, correct.
So we cover both variables, regardless of what the collective bargaining agreement says, even though we're not included in those discussions.
So I'm being reminded that between FY '24 and FY '25, the current year, the ADC went up from 142 million to 218 million. That was, help me here, $76 million increase. That was kind of a little breathtaking. I know it's hard to answer, but are we going to see something like that next year because of this collective bargaining agreement?
I would not anticipate that type of increase. One of the big reasons for the increase between fiscals 24 and 25 was the extensive retroactive nature of the pay increases, whereas these increases most recently negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement are much more current and we already assume increases will take place.
There's no future retroactive effect. right?
Yeah, there's not a future retroactive effect from this most recent
Yeah.
agreement.
And you should identify yourself for the record,
Oh, I'm Ann Sterner with Bolton.
which is the actuary.
Yes, Senior Consulting Actuary with Bolton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Balistrieri, question 15 in FY '23 DCRB had underspending of $5.1 million, mostly due to vacancy savings. For FY '24, you had $17 million in underspending, this time due in larger part for non-personal services. Will your FY '26 budget request take into account this underspending?
I didn't hear you too well. Are you asking a question about fiscal year 26 or
Yes.
what happened in fiscal year 24?
I'll try again. In FY '23, you underspent by 5.1 million. In FY '24, you underspent by 17 million. Will your FY '26 budget request take into account this underspending?
I believe we do take into account this underspending,
Yes.
but go ahead. Our
Lori
deputy
Morgan.
CFO, Lori Morgan.
So you are correct. In 26, we do take into account. However, we do have two big projects planned in 26 that will basically take up most of that surplus. And those are two projects for IT.
Right, we have to move forward with a new automation pension system, building out a new automated pension system to refurbish our current one. So after many years. So that is going to be in place as a surplus meant to make sure that we cover all contingencies in building that out once we do a full RFP.
Which is to say that the budget request for FY '26 will probably not be much less because you have these two projects.
Correct.
What effect do agency spending levels affect the annual contribution level? Let me rephrase that more plainly. If actuals more closely matched budgeted amounts, might we be able to lower the annual contribution?
I don't think they impact the annual contribution level.
Administrative spending is such a small drop in the trust funds that the contribution won't be sensitive to spending?
I don't believe so. Yeah.
I want to say Miss Bolton, but that's not your name.
Sure.
Ms. Sterner, thank you.
Ms. Sterner from Bolton, not Ms. Bolton.
Yep. The determination of the actuarially determined contribution does include a small, or it does include administrative expenses, but that is a very small portion of the entire
Yeah,
contribution.
very, very tiny and
very
immaterial.
small.
You said tiny, she said very small.
Immaterial.
Immaterial, yes.
Do we agree on immaterial?
We agree on immaterial.
Mr. Balistrieri, you mentioned in your pre-hearing questions that a lawsuit that has been pending for a few years has been fully briefed and is pending a decision with the Court of Appeals. What's the case, and do you have any indication when the Court of Appeals may rule?
That's an excellent question, but it should be sooner than later since it's been a couple of years. Again, the Court of Appeals is hearing an appeal from the other party, which to already a motion to dismiss on behalf of DCRB on all 7 counts. So it's now only 1 count being appealed of the 7 original counts. So we are basically awaiting that appeal decision based on a motion to dismiss that DCRB already was granted based on the answer you have in the questions.
Can you remind me a little bit more about the case?
I think it's very clear in the answer to the questions and who it is. You have it there. It's a former employee's case from 2021.
If the Court of Appeals were to rule against you, then it would just be remanded to the lower court for, or to the lower tribunal for, because it will not have been dismissed?
Unfortunately, I'm not in the position to speak to you about what the permutations or combinations of decisions are in the court system. Prefer to have counsel one. If you need further information, you can always provide that to you through our counsel.
Who represents the retirement board?
Sorry?
Who represents the retirement board in this case?
Our in-house general counsel and Jones Day, the law firm.
So it's not the DC Attorney General?
No.
Have there been any recent issues with payments between the U.S. Treasury and the retirement board? And I'm asking in light of all the news reports about funding freezes, spending freezes.
There have been no issues at all whatsoever. Everything's gone in the ordinary course of business.
Given that DCRB works closely with the Treasury Department to receive federal funds to pay federal annuitants, and DCRB acts as their pension administrator, has DCRB been approached by the federal government with regard to funds under your control?
No, we have not.
Do you have any indication you might be?
Not as of yet. To date, no. Do you have any indication we might be?
No,
Well, that's good. Makes 2 of us.
but I don't know the last time I talked to anyone with the Department of Treasury. Since the retirement board uses Octo as an IT vendor,
Mhm.
has DC Retirement Board or Octo developed any protocols should the federal government seek to involve itself or look at any of your systems?
Protocols in terms of privacy and
Yeah.
information.
Yeah,
Well, we have our protocols to the whole outside world, including the federal government. And I would say if that was escalated, we'd work with our counsel and the Attorney General's office to understand how to preclude that from happening and defend that. But since we haven't received any other issue so far, we haven't done anything. We have definitely been put under notice that we are in a position to work with the Attorney General's office to help us work with that.
Give me a second here. I have a question concerning, it was our pre-hearing question number 45. How many dollars are invested in fossil fuel companies? You have two columns, total energy exposure. I'm guessing that that's companies that are smaller than what's you have here is carbon underground 200. Is that a correct way to read that?
Well, there's total energy exposure on the left side, and that's everything that's direct and indirect investments, includes direct and indirect investments in anything to do with energy from the wellhead to the consumer, in upstream, midstream, downstream, right to gas stations, to power plants, et
So
cetera.
that's a broader universe than.
Right. So that's the broad universe there. Alternative energy exposure, which is 11.4 million out of the total 285 or so, which is 0.1% of our assets under management, is renewable type alternative energy. And our total energy exposure, including direct and indirect, is 2.3%, which is a total of 285 million of, at that time, as of December 31st, 2024, over $12.2 billion in management. So 2.3% of that, direct and indirect, right? So the total energy sector exposure amounts to only 2.3% of total assets under management as of the end of calendar year 24.
And some of that might be fossil fuels, maybe even.
Some
A
of
lot
that
of
might
it?
be fossil fuels.
In
And
fact,
on the right column, as you can see, carbon underground 200 exposure, out of that 285, you have about 203 million of it, which accumulates to 1.7% of our assets under management as of December 31st, 24, which is a total of 12.2 billion. That's direct and indirect.
now my recollection from previous years is that any exposure has been primarily due to indirect investments. I'm thinking like.
And as you
mutual
can
funds.
see, overwhelmingly, it still is at approximately 97, 98% of the total amount of exposure. Direct is only 0.2% and 0.1% respectively. Total energy exposure and 0.1% in the carbon underground 200.
Tell me again what indirect is.
Indirect is in public equity investment managers, mutual fund indexes, et cetera. Public equities, which we have no control over on decision making at a large capital markets, stock market level, so to speak. Commingled funds, mutual and et cetera.
Give me a second here.
Take your time.
Yeah, I'm remembering, we had a hearing a couple years ago on a bill, which I think we ultimately adopted, which was I think it was to require reporting on the part of the retirement board with regard to, I'm going to phrase it the way I had it in the written question to you, which is,
Could you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry.
I'm going to phrase it in the context that I had in the written question of seeking to increase professional services with women and minorities. What I remember from the hearing was that there was a lot of testimony that actually many of these firms, such as um, women firms, that they actually have a better investment record or return, arguably because they're small and they have more hunger. This is how I remember it from the hearing, to like really work hard to get your business by getting a good return. And maybe you weren't at the hearing. Mr. Blanchard, you were at the hearing. Am I
I do
remembering that
remember
correctly?
I remember some testimony along those lines, yes.
From third parties, not from us.
It might have been from you as well.
I don't think so. We're not in the business of,
I think it predates you.
it predates me. That must have
Yes.
been over 4 years ago then.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you are reporting on this in your annual reports?
Absolutely. We report. Our priorities are as if we have a fiduciary duty to our members to maximize the fund's returns and minimize risk when selecting fund managers and we base our selections on the best interests of the funds and our membership. We are required to report and disclose all information reasonably made available data to DCRB pursuant to our fiduciary duty, legal obligations with third parties, and pursuant to all applicable current state and federal laws. So everything we put in our ACFR is every single bit of information that have been provided to us by our investment managers in establishing and allowing to illustrate what we have for diverse and emerging fund managers. All the information we're allowed to put in and all the information we are provided based on that permissible.
So with regard to some of those emerging fund managers, are you seeing what I'm remembering, which is pretty good returns?
I don't focus on, like I said, our fiduciary duty is to focus on returns and minimizing risk. We don't make judgments on that basis. We make judgments on the basis of investment and financial metrics.
Well, sure, but surely you
Yes.
look at whether you're using Smith Brothers is giving you a crappy return as opposed to you're being involved with Jones Sisters and that's actually giving you a great return. You surely must look at that.
We do. We look at whoever's giving us a better return.
And that's what I'm asking you. What are you seeing?
We're focused, we're seeing everyone we invest in is because meritocratically, they are giving us the best returns and fulfilling our fiduciary obligations to our members.
You said invest in, but you meant invest with,
Invest
because we're talking about managers.
managers. So we invest in the managers to deploy our capital. So we invest with or in. Whichever way you want to look at it.
Last year, the committee held a hearing on legislation to establish a deferred retirement option program for police and firefighters. You provided substantial follow-up, which we appreciate. Based on much of the feedback you gave, the committee plans to mark up a bill that will ask the Office of Finance and Treasury within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer to establish a new retirement account as part of the district's contract to provide retirement services for non-police, fire, and teachers. The retirement board would only do a single calculation as it does today when an eligible employee starts taking their annuity. But that employee will be allowed to stay with their employing agency for up to 3 more years. The retirement board will only be tasked with creating a process to direct the annuity payments to the newly established account to be managed by a third party. Will the retirement board need any explicit authority to make such payments while employees participate in the DROP, the Deferred Retirement Option Program? Or do current plan rules allow an annuitant to direct their payments to other eligible retirement accounts already?
We are awaiting, the only thing I can tell you on that or respond to that is that we are here to, once we receive instructions, calculations and methods and design of the program implemented and executed upon by a third party. At this time, it's being considered that Ockville is going to work with a third party provider. Once we receive those instructions, calculations, methods and design, that's designed by a third party, we can then, upon those instructions, implement pursuant to those instructions and the design.
So current plan rules, your rules, or the rules you have to follow with the plans you have, the current plan rules allow an annuitant to direct their payments to this new retirement account that we would be setting up.
Potentially.
I understand that given the unique circumstances and how DCRB is funded and administered, that the Board of Trustees cannot be involved in the design of a new retirement program, like a DROP. Again, that's Deferred Retirement Option Program.
Correct.
However, given the new model proposed, would DCRB be willing to give feedback on the draft legislation to ensure that it does not raise any red flags?
There has been no new model proposed yet, except for what was proposed before, which we already said. There hasn't been anything planned yet more thoughtfully, and that's what Ockville's doing right now with potentially a third party. So we can't give you any more response if we don't have a design plan in place for us to review.
Well, we can send you a draft of the bill.
Well, you sent us a draft for the bill, which we commented on already, but
We have a new draft.
great. Well, I haven't received it yet. So until I receive it, we can't really opine on anything.
So you would be willing to give feedback on the draft legislation that we will send you?
When you are ready and Ockville is ready to prepare something thoughtful for us to review, we're here to look at it and respond.
All right. How soon do you want it?
Not what I want, it's what the members want. How soon is Ockville ready with a fully designed plan that's thoughtful and ready to be an actual designed program with a third-party provider? Are you sure they're ready? Because you can't have an appropriate bill with appropriate language in there unless you know what the design looks like to make sure it's thorough and comprehensive.
Well, that's not completely correct.
Well,
So we will send you.
the first try wasn't so good, so hopefully
So-
we'll have a better one this time.
We will send you a revised bill this afternoon.
Great. Has Ockville been able to give you feedback and add to that bill along with whoever they've looking to contract as a third party to design it?
And when you say Ockville, I assume you mean the Office of the Chief Financial Officer?
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, we have gotten feedback from them.
Great. And does that include conversations and a full proposal from a third party to add terms
No.
in the
now,
bill to
I'm getting,
reflect
I
that?
am getting a little annoyed here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have a bill.
I'm just asking questions, so
Yeah,
I
we have a bill.
want to make sure I'm
The
educated.
bill is a rewrite of what you commented on last year.
Okay,
It completely restructures the proposal for a deferred retirement option program. It has been run by the OCFO, so we believe that this works for them.
great.
They're not going to go out and get a third party until the legislation is approved.
Understood. But usually what happens is people will talk to a few third parties to get some ideas conceptually as to how they should.
Yes, well, I can represent to you that they've done all that, but
Great.
you may want to talk to them yourself to see if they've done all that.
Okay. Look forward to receiving it, Chair Mendelson.
You'll get it this afternoon. Do I have any other questions?
I like the expediency.
Yes. I do not have any other questions for you all.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We're going to turn now to the statehood delegation. So I'm going to call at this time Senator Paul Strauss, Senator Ankit Jain, and Representative Oye Owalewa. And I see Senator Strauss online. Senator Jain is in person. A couple of staff people here. I don't see Representative Oye Owalewa. Does anybody know if he's going to make it?
I thought he might be appearing virtually. I think the statement you have does incorporate testimony from him, and so we would be happy to proceed.
Yes, why don't-
as-
I think the protocol is we usually let you go first, Senator Strauss.
Yes, generally what has happened is I've presented in lieu of the two co-chairs of the commission. I would present the commission's testimony, such as it is, and then in the past, other members of the delegation have had the right to make their own presentations as well. I think we did make sure that you had written statements from myself, the representative, and Senator Jain there. He's, of course, welcome to read his directly into the record.
And I will recognize him after you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Paul Strauss, the senior elected United States Senator for the District of Columbia. I want to thank you for the privilege to appear before you at this agency performance oversight hearing for fiscal year 2024-2025 for the new Columbia Statehood Commission. I'm pleased to speak about the performance during the current fiscal year in front of our co-chair, along with Mayor Bowser, who've been one of the driving forces in leadership of the commission in conjunction with my fellow commissioners in accordance with Section 2.3 of the bylaws. I'm proud to be here. The commission has been promoting DC statehood not only locally, nationally, but also internationally. And we thank you both for your leadership of the commission during these exciting times. The commission's budget and statehood initiatives were designed for the purposes of educating, advocating, promoting, and advancing the proposition that statehood and voting rights for the District of Columbia is an important right, and making sure that district residents understand that this message is being taken not only to the residents of the 50 United States, but our fellow territories, and even presenting our lack of equality to the international community. The statehood initiatives outreach have traditionally focused fully on the importance of media, both television and radio, as well as the direct outreach to local citizens, schools, targeted areas, targeted states, and global citizens. The commission has been addressing the issue in national media, international media, and as new media continues to increase in prominence, you'll be seeing a shift with more resources being diverted to increase the digital footprint of the commissioners, including more and more engagement over digital media platforms. The commissioners have been rapidly increasing engagement with the 119th Congress as we continue to actively engage with Congress members to gain support to the DC statehood bill, which has been reintroduced this year in both chambers, sending a strong signal of how important statehood is as a priority. The commissioners are also committed to protecting home rule and working to defeat any resolutions of disapproval in the Congress, as well as opposing legislation that would adversely impact our self-determination. And I do know that Senator Jane, who's there, will be elaborating on his recent efforts since taking office during his testimony. One of our fundamental pillars continues to be the targeted outreach program. Senator Brown, before he departed, addressed legislative hearings in Nebraska on DC statehood. We've made efforts in Arizona and other places, including attending Public Fund Summit, which included members of public sector officials from all over the nation. Representative Owalewa visited Los Angeles to address the 2024 National Pharmaceutical Association as a guest speaker. And most recently, he was in the state of Utah, meeting with members of their state legislature to discuss DC statehood. It is unfortunate that Utah, which had one point been an ally of ours, at least in the fight for congressional House voting rights, now has a senator who seems to be leading the charge to repeal what limited self-determination we have. In addition to visiting the targeted states and engaging with those leaders, the commissioners have been maintaining mutual talks and exchanging information with our colleagues in territories like Puerto Rico and Guam to help better understand the situation and be an ally for each other's cause for self-determination. It's worth noting that Puerto Rico had another plebiscite in 2024, where the voters of the island Commonwealth supported statehood by approximately a 59% margin. While Guam has not yet had a territorial plebiscite on status, it has joined DC as a UNPO member for international efforts and is represented at the presidency level by their governor, Lou Guerrero, and we continue to engage with them as well. One of the hallmarks of our recent efforts was engaging in outreach at the two national conventions. As has been the past practice during presidential years, special outreach activities were organized at the national conventions of the two major parties. 2024 marked the 170th anniversary of the birth of the Republican Party, and as Republicans from all over the country gathered to elect their presidential nominee, we targeted efforts to gain attention for DC statehood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with a real celebrity event, including Tim Daly and Robin Bronk, with our strategic partners of the Creative Coalition, and supports from nonprofits like the Students for DC Statehood. As Democrats gathered in Chicago, we were successful in our attention to make DC statehood part of the national discussion. The outcome was having DC statehood in the Democratic Party platform, and we had an incredibly successful 51 Stars DC statehood luncheon with attendance by celebrities Rosario Dawson, Uzo Aduba, Ian Armitage, Anthony Armitage, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Yolanda Ross, Cheryl Lee Ralph, John Cryer, Dean Norris, Yatiri Badaki, and so many others. In addition, elected officials included Puerto Rico Governor Pedro Pierluisi. We heard from Mayor Muriel Bowser, and several members of the council were there and gave remarks, including Councilmember Robert White, Brooke Pinto, Anita Bonds, and Zachary Partner. The event was critical to the mission, and again, we thank our strategic partners at the Creative Coalition, and the volunteers from Students for DC Statehood who helped make that so successful. We continue to raise the effort internationally at the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, UNPO. UNPO concurs with the generally accepted view amongst international human rights entities that the lack of DC statehood is a violation of international law. And we will be exploring the appropriateness of raising the issue of DC status and perhaps that of other unrepresented Americans as the United States undergoes its UPR, Universal Periodic Review, at the United Nations. We will continue with our 51 Star Celebrity PSA campaign up until December. We continue to fund Senator Brown's Shadow Politics radio show. And we supported many other outreach efforts. And in particular, since he couldn't make it here, I'll address some of Representative Adeyoye Owalewa's outreach efforts. We've allocated funds for his supercar rallies and added that as a new statehood initiative last year. And the representative continues his outreach efforts. He's used his platform as a second-generation Nigerian American to focus on amplifying our quest for equality to a wider audience and quite often international platforms. He recently got arrested during a hands-off DC demonstration and has been featured in a variety of media, including the Washington Informer, the DC Line, Boston's Bay State Banner, Nigeria's leading publication, Vanguard, Fox 5, Channel 7, Voice of Africa, and many, many others. He'd like you to know that as DC's only elected healthcare worker and a former ANC commissioner, he's worked to improve public health and safety by creating evidence-based community programs to give folks second chances. He's hosted expungement clinics and job fairs with more than 150 clients, testified before the Opioid Abatement Commission, participated in East of the River Peace Walks, and helped personally vaccinate thousands of DC residents with flu and COVID shots, something that most of us elected officials can't really do. He's also partnered with DC Fire EMS to expand local Narcan demonstrations. And so we appreciate all of his efforts. The written statement continues with many of his accomplishments. And I'm also pleased to welcome newly elected Senator Jane. I know we're going to look forward to hearing from him. Those commissioners who are statehood delegations have met several times, and I'm pleased to say that we've reached an agreement in principle on the potential spending plan for fiscal year 2025. We expect to finalize a consensus budget for formal approval by the commission in the next several weeks. The efforts of the commission, our shadow congressional delegation, and the DC statehood movement as a whole have seen a lot of progress over the past few years, despite the obvious setbacks in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and of course, what's happening with the White House. We look forward to continuing to establish innovative ways to reach out to the people concerned and advocate strongly for DC statehood, especially as I've sat through some of these oversight hearings and seen some of the large numbers of the DC government agencies that are under your committee's purview. I remain ever confident that despite the very modest investment that you provide in funding to the commission, that we have been getting very, very good returns for the taxpayers on the issues that they have tasked us with working with. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'm of course happy to answer any questions that you or the committee might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jane?
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and council members and members of the Committee of the Whole. I am United States Senator Ankit Jain. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to update the Council and Washingtonians on my office's activities, and I thank Senator Strauss for the remarks that he just made. In addition to the administrative tasks required of any newly elected official, I have been heavily engaged in protecting DC home rule and advancing statehood since I was sworn in on January 2nd of this year. I led a coalition of the foremost defenders of home rule, including the DC Democratic Party and DC Vote, to put out a joint statement on the introduction of S4695, the Bowser Act, which attempts to repeal home rule. Even before I was sworn in, I met with the staff of U.S. Senator Katie Britt, Republican from Alabama, to advocate against the previous version of the Bowser Act and was told that her office opposed the bill. I continue to monitor the movement of the Bowser Act, and I'm confident that we will be able to defeat it and that will not move forward. I have been scheduling meetings with the chairman or ranking member of every congressional committee with jurisdiction over the District of Columbia, every member of Congress in the DC metropolitan area, every council member, and the mayor's staff to discuss their perspectives on defending DC's home rule. To date, I have already met with Congressman Don Beyer, Democrat from Virginia, and 5 council members. I am leading the efforts by advocates and allies to prevent our ranked choice voting ballot initiative from being disapproved in Congress. The initiative is currently going through the congressional review process, and I am confident that, thanks in part to this advocacy effort, Initiative 83 will officially become law next month. I also have been hard at work defending DC's law allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections. I have convened a group of allies to advocate against HR 884, which would repeal the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2022. This coordination and strategizing will put us in good position to fight back if this bill moves forward. I have been advocating for DC's federal workers, who have been greatly affected by the current presidential administration's attack on the federal workforce. I attended a protest at USAID and joined fellow members of Congress in trying to get into the building to understand what had transpired. I have attended other protests in support of our federal workers, such as a rally held by the American Federation of Government Employees labor union outside of the U.S. Capitol. I am currently soliciting stories from impacted federal workers, and my office will be creating a video to help the public understand how the administration's actions have impacted these workers and why DC statehood could have prevented these results. If anybody is interested who's watching this in contributing to that video, our website should be up tomorrow. It'll be www.senatorjaindc.com. I intend to get involved in the U.S. Senate's confirmation process for acting U.S. Attorney Ed Martin. I have requested a meeting with Mr. Martin through 4 different channels so I can understand his crime-fighting philosophy. Unfortunately, no meeting has been scheduled to date. I regularly attend events to explain what DC residents can do to protect home rule and update the community on my activities. I attended and spoke at the Women's National Democratic Club's Welcome to Congress reception for Democratic women, at the DC League of Women Voters post-election review and DC Civic Health Community panel, and at the DC Chinese Lunar New Year parade, where I was with all of you, with Senator Strauss and Chairman Mendelson, and that's to provide just a few examples. I also participate in regular calls with members of the statehood community to stay in touch about planned activities. I recently submitted written testimony in favor of Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009 in the North Dakota Senate, a resolution urging Congress to support admitting Washington, D.C. into the Union as a 51st state. My office is further scheduling meetings for a joint effort by the statehood community to hold a Congressional Advocacy Week in support of home rule and statehood. I am also preparing to engage in advocacy with the federal government to fill the 11 open judgeships in the DC Superior Court and the DC Court of Appeals. Finally, I am working hard at establishing relationships with reporters to ensure my office's actions are properly covered and regularly post on X/Twitter to advance arguments for DC home rule and statehood and to keep constituents updated on activities of my office. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to update you on my office's activities. I would be happy to answer any questions, although I will note that I'm aware that opponents of home rule might get a hold of this hearing, and so I might be constrained in how much detail I can go into in several answers. Thank you very much.
Representative Obalewa, do you have a statement?
Yes, sir, I do. And I'll submit such after my testimony.
Okay. Please proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, Committee of the Whole, and my fellow members of the statehood delegation, Senator Strauss, as well as Senator Jane. Since assuming office in 2021, I've helped push my office to fight for DC statehood in addition to bringing resources and experience to DC residents. As a second-generation Nigerian American, my focus has been amplifying our quest for equality to a wider audience and quite often international platforms. I've been fighting for DC statehood and literally got arrested during a hands-off DC demonstration as well. I've successfully performed the 3rd annual supercar parade for DC statehood after 2 successful ones in the past. This novel way of activism has helped introduce our fight for DC statehood in a new way. To date, I have been featured on several publications, which were mentioned by Senator Strauss earlier. My targeted state outreach initiative has taken me recently to Utah, but before then Los Angeles as well as West Virginia to increase the awareness for the fight for DC statehood. In Los Angeles, I was a guest speaker at the 2024 National Pharmaceutical Association, a 501c6 membership association. This convention annually brings together hundreds of pharmacy practitioners from all across this country, various regions, practice areas, specialties to promote education, awareness, and opportunities within the pharmacy profession. I spoke on topics pertaining to pharmacists' involvement in civic engagement, experience in pursuing statehood for the District of Columbia as a pharmacist, and healthcare professional in elected office. California is a targeted state for promotion of DC statehood, and this trip was part of my initiative approved by the commission. Recently, I was in Utah, which was the home of one of the senators that introduced the Bowser Act in Congress, aimed at stripping DC residents of their governance, whether it's the mayor, council, and the positions that we hold. I was able to meet with Minority Leader Angela Romero, and she is introducing some type of support for DC state through the legislature, which has never happened in Utah history. The goal of this is not only increase awareness in Utah, but also to show a clear message to Senator Lee that the people of his home state is aware that he is more focused on the matters of local DC residents and not prioritizing their own support. In addition, we talked about how voting representation in DC will help improve the quality of life for people in Utah, in which we will be able to have a national say on issues that right now they may not feel their current legislators are pertaining to. Inside DC, we're also finding ways to increase the awareness for DC statehood in novel ways. We have launched our expungement clinics to help returning citizens and also introducing how being citizens of a state would have impacted their lives. We have conducted capital business seminars to teach business owners about getting grants, certifications, and contracts through the local government, which may have been more opportunities if DC were to become a state. And last but not least, we're engaging young people, high school and younger, to not only think about themselves as civic leaders, but also arm them with the information of DC statehood. That way, if they stay in DC, they'll be part of our next generation of statehood supporters. Or if they were to move out of the district, they'll bring their fight for DC statehood with them. These are part of the ways that this office is geared on supporting the fight for DC statehood, to be members of a team as well as leading in new ways. And we are very honored to be able to do such. I thank you for your further investment in this office, because today's climate shows the need for senators and representatives to carry the fight for DC statehood. We are each other's constituents, we are each other's partners, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Obalewa. Thank you, each of you. A few questions. Let me see. With regard to the budget, Senator Strauss, you testified. I was a little bit confused. Let me see if I can find where it was. The impression I have is that the three of you as a delegation have adopted a budget, but I think in your statement, Senator Strauss, it was not quite so definitive. What's the status of the three of you working out the commission's budget?
We've had several meetings. We've gotten agreement on the items that we want to see funded. There's a few details to be worked out. And I'm confident that we'll be wrapping up that process shortly. I would like any delegation putting together a budget. There's not always 100% unanimity in every situation, but I think we've reached a consensus between the three of us. And we just have to iron out a few of the smaller details. I'd put our process up against the councils or what Congress is doing any day.
Okay, I like that. I'm not quite sure what it means. So there's a consensus, but a few details to work out. What does that mean?
That means that we've met and we've decided on that, and we've got a process to follow, and we'll be following that process. And I expect in the next few weeks, we'll be presenting you with or the commission, as it were, with the a spending plan that has the support, unanimous support of the delegation, and with the unanimous support of the delegation, the de facto majority support of the commission.
So should we go ahead and schedule the commission meeting?
I do think that would make sense because I know it takes some time to, get everybody's schedules lined up, especially because you and the mayor are very busy. So, I mean, I think that if we can schedule it, that would give us, I don't want it to be like, 3 months from now, like after the budget has been introduced. So if we start scheduling it now, it might be useful to get a date in the books, and then we can just move forward and with a presentation of our proposal.
So how soon should it be? A month from now? 2 weeks from now?
I think we're happy to work with your office and the mayor's team to pick some dates and that will be consistent.
All right, that was not helpful.
I think 2 to 4 weeks from now seems to me like it would be appropriate on my end. I don't see any reason why we couldn't hit that benchmark.
Senator Strauss, do you agree 2 to 4 weeks?
I think that's achievable if that's your preference as one of the two chairs.
So I will go ahead and work to schedule a meeting of the commission 2 to 4 weeks from now. In the last 4 years, 2 out of the 3 members of the delegation have changed. I always ask the question of the commission to the effect of what initiatives are each of you working on to advance statehood? Now, I know you've gone through that in your statements, but I want to ask the question again. Are there any new or changed initiatives to report on? Who do I start with? Senator Strauss?
Obviously, we had a big strategy organized around the national conventions, and obviously, we know that statehood can advance or be made more challenging by the composition of the Congress as determined by the national elections. And so, obviously, we did not get a result in the congressional elections that was favorable to prompt passage of the statehood bill. But I'm encouraged that we've been able to get both bills reintroduced in each chamber with a significant number of co-sponsors. Unfortunately, they're all from one party and not the other. The current hyper-partisan climate is going to make it difficult to advance statehood in this particular session, but we have to continue to be ready and take advantage of the opportunities that may be presented by the midterm elections. Obviously, if the national elections had gone a different way, all of our efforts, particularly those in Chicago that were targeted towards engaging what would have been a new Harris administration, would have been gone a long way and been more successful. Now we're back on defense, and so the strategies will have to be adopted accordingly.
Senator Chang?
Yeah, I mean, so I see my office's focus is twofold on this front. One is the legislative strategy, and the second is the education, both within DC and outside of DC. So on the legislative strategy, even before I was elected, I was working with national voting rights groups to get DC statehood as part of a voting rights package. And I know the mayor has spoken in similar language to make sure that when we have the Congress and the president who are ready to move forward on expanding voting rights in this country, that DC statehood is an essential part of that package and that conversation, and it moves along with the rest of these bills that the Congress has been considering. And so that's on the legislative strategy. On the statehood side, that's where I see our actions going, is making sure that statehood remains a part of that package. And when we have the opportunity and the right Congress and the right president, we're ready to go. We're ready to hit send and on that strategy. I think right now we are in a moment where we're more about defending home rule. And so I've been working on legislative strategy on the home rule front. And so I discussed my efforts to protect Initiative 83 from disapproval and to protect our non-citizen voting law from being repealed. And so those actions were convening advocates together to move forward on one shared strategy and have very, well thought out messaging and a plan of action on defending these laws from being attacked, I think is the best thing we can do to protect our laws from being overturned by the Congress. Now, on the education side of things, when it comes to statehood, I think that there's the education within DC and outside of DC. So within DC, what I've been trying to do is go to as many communities as I can and make the case for why statehood matters to people's everyday lives and why it's not just an abstract democracy concern, but it actually has real consequences for real people's lives every single day, and make it so that they feel invested in the fight for statehood so that we can get increased participation in the different actions and the movement for DC statehood generally. And so that's what I'm working on within DC. Nationwide, I think that the biggest obstacle to statehood has been that most people in this country don't even know what the situation is in Washington, D.C. And when you talk to them, every single one, except for the most partisan Republicans, will understand immediately the injustice of what we're facing. And so what I hope to do is to highlight the injustices of our lack of statehood. And I do think that, unfortunately, DC will be in the spotlight, the national spotlight, over the next few years. And people are going to see what the impacts are of our lack of statehood. It's not just that we don't have any voting representatives in Congress, which we don't, but it's also that we don't have full self-government, that we always have to look over our shoulders, that Congress is continually overturning our laws. And what I would submit is that if somebody outside of DC doesn't want the Congress setting their traffic laws or their bathroom policies, why would you want that for the people of DC? And that's the argument that I'll be making through media and through any other means possible as these attacks come our way. To make it clear that the only solution to prevent these kinds of attacks is DC statehood. And so that's how I hope to educate people across the country as well.
Representative Olawale.
Yes, thank you for that question. I believe is where some of the new initiatives that we're doing in calendar year 2025. And as Senator Jane just mentioned, the fight for DC statehood is not merely just political or legislative, it's also awareness. When I was in Utah, when I was in Los Angeles, when I was in West Virginia, people didn't even know we had representation. And when it comes to fighting for home rule, it really let people understand what's going on here in DC, how legislation that we're passing has to go through congressional 30 to 60-day review. And the real thing is to make sure people understand what's happening. So the initiatives that we're doing in 2025 and beyond are focusing just on continuing that conversation and building more opportunities to get people around this country to understand what's going on in DC. So one thing we're going to do is use AI to really have a dialogue for us, making sure folks who are in Minnesota, who are in Texas, have a way to have a conversation in ways that we otherwise couldn't do. I can't go to every single state in the next 12 months, but hopefully what we do online and how we're able to put things on a multimedia platform make a case for us. We're also trying to create some sort of podcast or some scheduled programming to also address these conversations about statehood and what's going on in DC. As Senator Jane and Senator Strauss mentioned earlier, every part of our life in DC is impacted by not being a state, whether it's how we pass our laws, how we're able to push our budget, how we're able to control our resources or our territories. And we're trying to seek investment into this office to create that AI platform, to create that podcast platform to ensure that we keep this conversation alive. Because if we just allow those who don't like us to make a narrative about us without us having our own voice, then what people say about us becomes true. And what people say about us isn't necessarily what's accurate or supportive of what's going on here in DC. We're not trying to be better than anybody else. We want to be treated the same. And I'm investing and I'm pushing my office to create that national dialogue.
Thank you. Senator Jane, in your statement, you said that with regard to the affected federal workers who've been fired, laid off, threatened, whatever, that you have explained why DC statehood could have prevented those results? I was confused.
Yeah, we're in the process of making a video with some stories from workers who have been affected by these recent attacks, where we'll highlight, just what it means to regular people, what this administration is doing, and then part of that video will be talking about why DC statehood would help prevent some of the worst of these impacts. Because I mean, if myself, Senator Strauss, Representative Olalewa, Delegate Norton, if any of us had votes in the U.S. Senate or the House, and if we had subpoena power, if we had a spot on committees, I think that the conversation really would be going in a different way, because Washington, D.C., to my knowledge, has the highest, per capita federal workforce participation rate in the country. And so we understand to a degree that maybe other representatives do not, just what this means to regular people. And what the video will be talking about is the impact that could have on the national conversation to have representatives speaking from a place of real knowledge and empathy on these issues.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not quite following that. So, I mean, I know that the senators from Maryland and Virginia have been outspoken and are also very much opposed to what's going on. Yes, if we had representation in the House and the Senate right now, the Republicans would not be in the majority, but that doesn't necessarily follow by definition if we have statehood. Therefore, the president of the United States would not be trying to fire federal workers.
Well, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. Actually, I don't think we would be in the majority. I think we'd still be in the minority, even if we had. I think that the partisan composition, the majority leader would stay the same in the United States Senate, and the Speaker of the House would probably be the same in the U.S. House, whether or not DC had statehood, just based on the math. But I'm not saying that it wouldn't be happening. I think that we might be able to push back a little bit more effectively, is what I'm saying. Obviously, we have a president who seems to be ignoring Congress and the laws, so it's not going to be like DC state is going to solve that problem. But I do think that we'd be able to push back more effectively.
Have any of you with the new Congress been able to meet with the key chairs regarding the district in the House or the Senate? I'm speaking of appropriations as well as oversight, meeting with, for instance, Chairman Comer or the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, or Senator Paul, who has the Oversight Committee in the Senate. Or I think it would be Senator Collins, maybe with the Senate Appropriations Committee. Have any of you been able to meet with any of those?
So my office has sent requests, I think several times, to the heads and ranking members of House Oversight and Senate Homeland and Government Affairs Committee, which is the committee in the Senate that handles DC. And so we're hopeful we can get those meetings scheduled within the next, several weeks to the next month. I know that members of Congress are busy right now. I have been able to meet with staff on House Oversight, and I actually have been meeting somewhat regularly with staff on House Oversight to get an understanding of, from their perspective, of what's coming down the pike. but we're working on getting the meetings with the ranking members and the chairs of those committees. And I have been able to schedule a meeting with Representative Byer, and I'm hoping to get one. We're working on getting one with Representative Subramaniam from Loudoun County as well. And so I think that the issue is just
Sure, but they're
scheduling.
not the chairs or ranking.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're working on it. I think the issue, it's a scheduling issue, and so we're trying to get schedules aligned and make sure it
How
happens.
long have you been trying to get those meetings?
Probably, Karen, like 3 weeks. Yeah, probably.
Senator Strauss?
Spoken with Senator Paul, although not in this session of the Senate, and we've arranged other meetings. I don't know that this is the best way to have that conversation, with all due respect. I believe in public transparency. I believe in public accountability. But I don't necessarily believe in releasing all the details of everybody we speak with. And I also value strategic discretion as well. I hope.
Well, I'm going to
That's
push back a little. I think it's worth this committee knowing, and maybe the public knowing, whether you've been able to meet with and the committee leadership or the chamber leadership.
Not in the 119th yet.
119 referring to the current Congress. Representative Olawale?
Yes, thank you for that question. I haven't been able to meet with the actual leadership of the committees. I have been having conversations with bipartisan, Republicans and Democrat senators and representatives, especially considering home rule. Talking to them, like, do they really want to have a jurisdiction over the trash pickups in DC? Do they really want to be the ones being called if there's a pothole to be filled in Southeast DC? Just really seeing if they're really interested in repealing home rule and the ramifications of that. I believe right now we're in the defense stage of not only of statehood, but also our local governance. And being the chief lobbyists of our local democracy, I think it's very important for us to not only have conversations with the representatives or the senators, but also the staff as well, to make sure, even if I'm not able to meet with a ranking member or with the chairperson, that the people of their office, or if need be, the people of their constituency, are understanding the ramifications of these actions.
I missed that last part. So have you been able to meet with Senator Paul or Senator
No,
Peters?
I haven't met with Senator Paul, Senator Peters. I believe I have spoken to their staff. Most recently, I spoke to a special advisor of a Republican senator who's not in leadership, but would be one of the people that would be key votes if any anti-DC home rule legislation goes into the Senate.
Okay. Somebody, I guess it was Senator Brown, went to Nebraska last year. Did they adopt a resolution?
They held a hearing on a resolution. It did not make it out of the unicameral Nebraska legislature.
And what was the result of Utah?
So in Utah, they are still figuring out what they're going to do. Typically, when it comes to going to mostly red or quote unquote conservative states, the idea or the mission would be to introduce a legislation but not vote on it. We wouldn't want to see a legislation get silently defeated. So the introduction of that legislation would be the goal. Now, if we were to go to a state that's more liberal leaning, because it's such a partisan issue, then those the goals will be a little bit different. However, I do have an initial pledge to introduce a citation, given that they're past most likely the period that they can do a resolution over there. I believe they will revisit a resolution in the next congressional period. Next legislative period. But right now they're pledging on doing a citation, not only through the House leadership, but also the state Senate leadership as well. And that should be coming.
I have in my mind that one of you has been meeting with North Dakota or South Dakota. Am I right? Or did I make that up?
It's not necessarily meeting with North Dakota or South Dakota. I believe there is a DC statehood resolution that was I believe there was a hearing on that last week. And I believe I submitted a written testimony, but I think other people also did a virtual testimony submission. But that was last week. It was North Dakota, if I'm not mistaken.
And what's the status of that?
That resolution was defeated in committee.
Okay. And I think this goes back last year or 2 years, West Virginia. I'm looking at, one of you went to West Virginia, one of you being.
That was me.
Line.
That was
And
me.
did they adopt anything?
So, as I mentioned before, if it's a truly conservative, probably not such a legislative body that would be willing to pass a DC statehood resolution, they would just introduce it. So it's put in their official record.
Trying to figure out how this is advancing the cause. Do you all have a plan for the 50 states?
So the goal is to have people all across this country see this legislation. So if every year we gain more co-sponsors, that will show that we have a growing number of support. If we're having people who are currently state representatives, like my friend Jasmine Crockett, now become a congressperson in the U.S. Capitol, we know where our friends are. So, it doesn't show as a win in terms of a legislation being passed. However, we are keeping track of our supporters all across this country. As I mentioned before, the fight for DC statehood is not just going to be one in legal courtrooms or on legislative bodies. It's really going to be one in the hearts and minds of Americans all across this country. So if people see that their favorite Congress member or their favorite state representative is introducing a DC statehood resolution, then they will start knowing that they're more than just the White House and more than just the Senate in DC, that we have 700,000 Americans that are not getting their just due.
Anyone want to speak to my question?
I think, for example, in Arizona, we did engage with the state legislature. There have been resolutions introduced. It's the purpose of engaging with the people of Arizona, though, is to get those Arizona constituents to engage with their senator. The fact that we had, at the time, 2 Democrats from Arizona who were not sponsors of the statehood bill was why we targeted Arizona. Yes, it's important to go to these state legislatures, but we are not pursuing a constitutional amendment. We're pursuing legislation. And so while it's helpful and symbolic to get actual votes by the state legislatures, the real goal of going to state legislatures, opinion leaders, visiting these places is to develop the kind of support for DC statehood that will encourage the members of the House and the members of the Senate from those states to get on the bill. There's no reason really for Senator Mark Kelly to not be a co-sponsor of the DC statehood bill. And so
Is he still not a sponsor?
He's not. So what we're trying to do is we've engaged particularly with members of the Hernandez family, including Daniel Hernandez, who was the intern for Gabrielle Giffords, who ran to her aid when she was tragically shot and served some terms in the Arizona state legislature. He was the introducer of that statehood bill and has a very, very close relationship with the Kelly Giffords family. So it's that kind of pressure campaign at very, very targeted levels. But the goal was not to necessarily get the Arizona State House to pass a resolution. It was to get Arizona's federal officials to support the bill. And I do think we've made progress, at least in that area, because Kristen Sinema, who was essentially a statehood opponent, despite her membership in the Democratic Party, has been replaced with Ruben Gallego, who was a sponsor of the bill when he was a member of the House. And we will continue to work with him to get his sponsorship on the bill here.
So he sponsored it in the House, but he hasn't in the Senate.
Not yet. We're optimistic.
So I still don't have a sense of any kind of a coordinated plan here with regard to the 50 states.
Well, the targeted states is not necessarily the 50 states. The targeted states are those states where we need to pick up members of Congress who may not yet be on the bill and may not yet be supporting the bill to focus on the bill. Iowa, for example, was a strategic targeted state because of its prior role in the caucuses. For example, we used that effort when Iowa was the leader in the caucuses to get state interjected into the presidential campaign. So which states are targeted changes a lot. We can talk about more results and we could talk about more resources as well. But the targeted states initiative is about targeting states, not necessarily all 50 states.
I would just add, I agree with what Senator Strauss and Representative Oleo said, that this is helpful, but not dispositive in making DC statehood happen. And so I think it helps us bring pressure on the federal lawmakers to get on the bill. And of course, at the end of the day, we need to go through the legislative process and make sure that that bill is actually ready to pass when we have a better Congress in play. And so that's where I've been focusing on, is making sure, spending most of my time making sure we have the right legislative strategy in place so that we can hit go when we have a better Congress in place.
I have one last question. I submitted pre-hearing questions and I appreciate that we got a response. You submitted a Schedule A, which lists 2 individuals in the employ of the delegation. I also requested an organizational chart. The organizational chart does not relate to those 2 individuals at all. I would like to ask that you resubmit the organizational chart to show how the 2 employees fit in with the commission or with the delegation. Sort of looking at you, Senator Strauss.
We're happy to provide a new organizational chart. I think we've provided the organizational chart that we have under the commissions. We took the organizational chart that we provided from the district government's organizational chart that addressed the commission. And so we would be happy to provide that. Something else.
Sure. The question that you answered was, please provide as an attachment a current organizational chart for your agency with the number of vacant and filled FTEs marked in each box. Include the names of all senior personnel.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, we're happy to
I knew you'd be happy.
Revise that as you see fit. The responses we provided were responses prepared by delegation staff, essentially on behalf of the commission, which is the entity that you actually chair and the mayor co-chairs. And so if you're interested as a member of the commission or in your capacity as chairman.
You want me to do the organizational chart?
I didn't say. If you're interested in that as a member of the commission yourself, we're happy to provide that to you. And we're happy to supplement our answers to the prepared questions on anything that you feel merits more an additional deliberation or elaboration.
Can I just share 2 updates
Yeah.
that our staff assistant, Karen Shelgett just let me know. So first of all, I'm happy to report that my meeting with Ranking Member Jerry Connolly from House Oversight has been scheduled, and it's on the calendar. I wasn't aware of that, but it's happening. The second update I have is that Senator Ruben Gallego actually has become a co-sponsor on S51 that happened on the 11th of this month. And so he is now on the bill.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. I want to thank each of you for your service and also for your testimony today. That's going to conclude this hearing. We have, the Committee of the Whole has a hearing 2 more this week and then 3 next week. And the one tomorrow is public witnesses on DCPS and Friday is government witnesses on DCPS. The time is 5:15 p.m. and this hearing is